Hölgyeim és uraim, sok szeretettel köszöntök mindenkit itt a World Conservation Forum színpada előtti nézőtéren, és azokat is, akik online követnek bennünket, tekintettel arra, hogy a következő beszélgetés angol nyelven zajlik majd, ezért most én is átváltok angolra. Ladies and gentlemen, hello folks who are following us online. Our next presentation will be about the realistic ways of fighting the climate change. Our guests, we have the honor to have Barbara Botos, Deputy Minister of State for Climate Policy, and we have Máté Litkei, Director of the Climate Policy Center. He will be the moderator of the conversation. Enjoy.
The battle horns.
So good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming. Thank you for joining us. This session is going to be about climate policy. Climate policy and exactly what can be a realistic way when we deal about and tackle climate change. So I'm more than happy to have Máté Litkei, who is the General Manager of the Institution for Climate Policy. So welcome.
Thank you very much.
And I think this is a very interesting topic because Hungary represents that Central Eastern European region in which the countries have a lot in common. So my first question to you in this discussion, so based on your opinion, what would be the most suitable policy and measures for emission reduction, not only in Hungary, but generally for the countries in this Central Eastern European region?
Yes, first of all, thank you for the invitation for the organizers of the event. It's truly an honor to be here with you on the stage. And it's quite an exam situation right now, so I'm a little bit anxious about it, but I will manage. If we look at the perspective of Hungary, it's quite a simple picture because if we raise the question as what can we do against the catastrophic consequences of the climate change, we can see two parts of the thing. The one part is that we contribute only about 0.1% of the global emission, and the other part is the impacts of the climate change are very severe in this region. And in the Carpathian Basin, actually, it can be more serious than in the rest of the world. So if we raise the question that we should focus on mitigation or adaptation, I can say that we should focus on adaptation first, but we cannot say that we shouldn't mitigate because I personally believe that every country, whether it is a small or big country, should contribute to the global effort. And Hungary does. We deal with this question pretty good, but I will speak about it a little bit later. But if we look at the Central Eastern European countries, we can see a very diverse picture. For example, you have to look at the geographical, the economic, the social, the political differences of these countries. And because of those differences, the solutions will be naturally different. For example, in Poland, the energy production mainly comes from coal. So in Poland, the main question will be how they can phase out coal power plants and what the cost will be. In other countries, maybe they are more lucky. There are some countries who can base the energy production, for example, renewable energy sources like hydro power plants. It is a very lucky situation because it can provide provides a very stable and relatively stable and totally carbon neutral way of energy production. But other countries like Hungary is not so lucky in a way, because we can base on, for example, weather-dependent solar panels. If you use solar panels, for example, you have to balance the system stability. And it's another fact that in Hungary, the conditions of using solar panels are very good. We can use them in about 2,500 hours in a year. But the fact is, a year consists of 8,760 hours. So you have to base your energy production something else too. And this is why our energy mix and other countries' energy mix is so diverse. So setting goals together is, I think, it's a good way to cope with climate change. But how you get there, what pathway you choose to get there, should be different, and we should respect this kind or this sense of sovereignty of the countries. We can speak about energy sovereignty, but we can speak about climate sovereignty as well. How you cope climate change, the consequences of climate change, and how you manage to achieve the climate goals should be in national competencies, I think.
Thank you so much. So we are here at a World Conservation Forum, and the title of this discussion is basically what the realistic ways can be towards tackling climate change. I think in the Central Eastern European region, we really need realistic and down-to-earth solutions. But at the same time, we have to catch up with Western European member states of the EU. So how can this path towards climate neutrality happen in a parallel fashion with achieving economic development?
Yeah, when I speak about realistic ways, I mean you have to find a solution where you can comply different interests. For example, different and often very diverse and controversial economic and social interests. If you can't find a way to manage the social and economic interests, your climate policy would possibly fail. And I know this is a little bit too general, but what I mean, for example, if we speaking about reaching carbon neutrality in energy sector, we should also speak about energy prices, for example. It's very recent right now. Or we should speak about system stability or energy supply security as well. Because if we ignore those aspects, we can cause even more trouble than it was before. And about Central Eastern European countries, when we set a policy, we speak a lot about threats, but we should speak a lot about opportunities as well, because those countries have a lot of opportunity in the changing world, and if we can act in proper time, then we can find some good business opportunities. Speaking about Hungary, we have some remarkable know-how and technology and solutions in agriculture or in water management and in other sectors as well. And if we can cope the challenges in our own country, we can develop some new solutions, we can innovate, and those innovations could be exportable. And in the rest of the world, they're facing the same problems, basically. It's just a quick reminder, in 2019, in India, Chennai, there was a 19 million city where people were in a very severe water crisis. They were basically without water. It was, once again, 19 million people. And if we can provide a solution for them, it's not just a humanitarian act, but it's a mutually beneficial way to have businesses and gain your export opportunities. And the key word here is, I think, economic viability. So if you find a way to cope climate change and make good businesses, then you've done the job. To catching up to Western Europe, I think gaining export opportunities is one factor, but the other is developing your productability. And it's about improving technology, improving education and skills of labor, and gain and use wisely the capital you have. So these are the core pillars, how we can catch up to Western Europe. And all in those pillars, green economy or the transition to green economy provides good opportunity for Hungary and for the Central and Eastern European countries to catch up, I think.
And when we are talking about economic development, we cannot forget about the role of industries. So in general, what do you think the role of industries would be in the energy transition in Central Eastern Europe?
It would be easy to argue that all of the resources we have should be put in mitigation the effects of climate change, because there's a saying, there's no economy on a dead planet. But what's the point to cope with climate change if we beat ourselves back to the Stone Age? So we have to find a realistic middle way between everything and nothing. And this is something what is the challenge, I think, of the decision makers, both in the public and the private sector. And I personally believe, I am not an elitist. I do not mean that if decision makers do their job, then we are done and we shouldn't do anything. I personally believe everything should do their job, and everybody should contribute to this issue. But I personally think that a person in charge of a multinational company, of an energy company, or even in charge in a government has significantly much bigger responsibility than so-called average people. So I don't know how I get here, but the point is companies have a big responsibility to cope with climate change, and we should share the responsibility between companies and average people. And in the energy sector, I think, but it's true for almost all sectors I researched in, the future is centralized, big data-based and integrated decision supporting systems. Because nowadays you can extract data from basically any kind of part of the production or the processes. And with these data you can predict things, you can set trends, you can minimize losses, maximize productivity, identify intervention points. So you have a lot of that data, and if you can manage the data, you can be more efficient. And sustainability, in my understanding, is nothing different to efficiency. If you are energy efficient, if you are carbon efficient, if you are waste efficient, and so on, you are more and more sustainable. And in energy sector is the two biggest challenges: how you can as efficient as you can, and how you can transform the production of energy as carbon neutral as you can. I don't know if I give the answer. I'm sorry.
Thank you. So this year there will be a huge conference in Glasgow COP26, which is Conference of the Parties of the United Nations Climate Convention, Convention for Climate Change. And we know all that because of the pandemic, last year there was no Conference of the Parties, so there is a huge personal momentum. This will be a personal COP, which means all delegations from almost 200 countries are going to go to Glasgow to discuss how we can basically turn theory into practice, how we can turn the theory of the Paris Agreement into practice, which is the Paris Rule Book. So the Visegrad 4 countries and also the Central Eastern European region in general is very active in these COPs. So how do you see the way we can set an example for developing countries to follow? Are Visegrad 4 countries or this region proactive in this international negotiation? And how do you think we could take a leading role in showing a way towards climate neutrality for similar countries in the developing region who are going through similar energy transition than this region?
It's not easy to answer because, you know, we can always do more, of course. But if you look at the numbers, Europe and Central Eastern European countries and V4 are quite okay. So Europe could cut its emission compared to the 1990 base date about 24%. And Central Eastern European countries together could do the same, like 39 or 38%. So we are, if we speak about Central Eastern European countries together, we are much above of the European average. It is, of course, because we suffered the collapse of the old socialist heavy industry, but this is not the only driver, actually. Because if we look at the policies made since 1990, we can see a lot of investment going into the low-carbon industry. Almost all the countries of this region modernized the chemical industry of its own. They restructured the energy production. Most countries made very serious steps towards to coal exit, and they could gain their export capacity, which is important because if you gain the export, you gain your capital, and if you have capital, you can invest in the low-carbon industry. So, yeah, it was some good and serious measures in those countries. Hungary made approximately 32% of emission cutting since 1990, which is quite good. We are in the first third part of Europe. And if we look at the climate goals, for example, for 2050 carbon neutrality, we can say it's possible for us. Of course, it will cost a lot. We should put a lot of effort in it. We should work a lot with it, but it's possible. It's possible for Europe, but if we look at the European Union, we see countries which not even decrease, but increase the emissions since 1990, so there are challenges as well. But if you look at the Central Eastern European countries, the intermediate 2030 goals, which is in the national legislation in Hungary, 40%, it's feasible as well. I think as well as before, we should work a lot, we should invest a lot, but it's feasible. And for the Central Eastern European countries, we are almost done. We are 1% from there. Yeah, but the European Union in the recent period increased this intermediate goal to 55%. And it's really a challenge how we can cope with it, because, of course, technically we can do it, but who will pay the bill at the end of the day? This is the real question. I mentioned Poland before. 80%, approximately 80% of the energy production comes from coal, and they have to phase out coal and replace it something different, an alternative energy source. But who will finance that? This is the real question, and this is why it will be, or there will be really serious debates in the European level. But it's okay. I think setting goals, as I mentioned before, together is great. I am very glad that we have an agreement in the European Union that climate change is a very serious problem. We should cope with it, and we set goals. That's okay. But if we are ambitious about increasing goals, especially in intermediate goals, we should be generous financing it. And in this question, we could not do, we have to represent national interests in this debate. And it will be a serious debate, I think.
Exactly, and this Hungarian goal, the present goal, which is enshrined in law, is not only 40%, but at least 40%.
Yes.
So I think Hungary is doing its fair share to reach the common 55 European reduction goal. We were talking about what's going to happen in Glasgow. COP25 was in Madrid 2 years ago, and now everybody is looking forward to the Glasgow meeting. And I said it's a personal COP. It's a personal conference of the parties, not only because after COVID, people can meet there personally, but also it has become personal because people can feel the effects of climate change on their skin. So if we have a look at what happened in Belgium, if we have a look at what happened in Germany, in the Czech Republic, but if we go to the United States, the forest fires, and the hurricanes that are almost daily events right now. So this COP will be special from this point of view as well, because it has become a personal COP. So everybody, the people feel that they are affected. And do you think that people in this region, in this Central Eastern European region, feel this personal involvement? Are people here in this region considering climate change as a priority? Is it high on the personal agenda, or we still need to work on communicating? And your Climate Policy Institute is doing a whole lot on communicating it. So what do you think about how we can be game changers in this field, or we don't need to do anything because it's already there on the agenda of people?
Looking at the surveys, we can see it's already there, but it doesn't mean we don't have to do our job. As you mentioned, extreme weather events are on daily basis in the news. There are historical heat records, droughts, floods continuing each other. So yeah, there are some really extreme events and situations, not just in the EU, but in the world. And there was a Eurobarometer survey published by the European Commission in 2019 or 2012. I'm not sure yet. But it said that the European people, 91% of the European people is thinking that protecting the environment is one of the most important things in the European Union. And about 95% of the people think that climate change is one of the key problems, or one of the biggest issues in the European Union. And it's a fun fact that the Hungarian respondents, the records of the Hungarian respondents are higher. So we can say the Hungarian people are more environmentally aware than the European average. I think it's because the Hungarian government and the Hungarian NGOs did a phenomenal job in the last period to draw attention to the problem and find some solution. But if I look at the researches, I can see that more and more people becoming climate anxious. They have climate anxiety, and it's sad. It's like the case of fearing because of the aviation, because of flying an airplane. The situation is the same, I think. It is like, you know, there's a fact, it's a well-known fact, that significantly more people is afraid about aviation than land transportation, and at the same time, significantly more people die on the roads daily basis than because of airplane disasters. And this is because the illusion of the control, I think. When you holding the steering wheel, or you feel the control over the car, and you feel the control that you can do against the disaster something. But when you just travel with a car, you can warn the driver that something happens in a dangerous situation. But when you're boarding an airplane, you immediately give up this control, because something happens, you can't really do against it anything. And the situation is the same in the case of climate change, because the majority of people know there is a horrible global problem, but almost nobody knows what we should and can do against it. And they get more and more frustrated. And I think the job of the governments and of the NGOs right now, that almost everybody knows there's a problem, that we should give back this control about their lives. And how we can do this, we have to communicate very frequently with the people. We have to inform them about what's happening, what we can do, what the governments, the NGOs, the other public actors do against climate change. And what we can do, organize some call to action events and involve the people to be part of the solution. So this is what we do at the Climate Policy Institute, and actually this is what the government do as well, because the government in Hungary is organizing right now the TESZED movement, which is a very huge nationwide garbage collection, garbage picking movement. People get involved to cleaning their environment, to do something against illegal garbage dumping. And of course, there's the green consultancy right now. And the government asked the people, what should we do? Which pathway we should take to cope climate change? What are your preferences? And this is good, because if people are involved, they have an engagement in the problem. And I think the key here is the solution-based communication. And this is what the Hungarian government actually do. And this is what the Climate Policy Institute try to support and do also.
Yeah, I think you're right. Many psychologists say that anxiety pushes people in a passive mode. And anxiety is never good for becoming active and involved. So back to this question, so how do you think that the constant support and participation of people in green transition can be maintained? What are the tricks for that? So as I said, in 2015 in Paris, when the Paris Agreement was agreed upon, by almost 200 countries. There was a huge political momentum. Everybody felt that there is something in the air, and we have to keep this political momentum. We shouldn't let it fall down on the earth. We have to keep it. And there were many other climate conferences, even organized by governments in the United States, in France, and so on, to keep this high political momentum. Right now, we see that there is a personal momentum. People feel it on their skin. It's happening to them. So they do care. How can we keep this personal momentum? How we can carry people with us on this road, that they need to act, they need to get involved?
I think there are different levels where we can involve people. The first level, I think, what we do in Climate Policy Institute, the education. Education is very important to get an understanding what's going on in the world, why climate change is a problem, what climate change can cause, and so on and so on. But what we do at Climate Policy Institute is a kind of education of the future elite. What I mean is that we have access to highly skilled and hyper-intelligent students at the Matthias Corvinus Collegium, and they are the best of the best among the students. They surely will be the next generation leaders. So we try to build on it, build something on it. For example, we draw their attention what are the environmental problems, but it's not just an attitude-forming kind of education. We try to give them all the knowledge that they possibly will have to make the right decisions when they will be the leaders. So when they will be in charge, for example, in a multinational company or in the public sector, they have to keep in mind not just the interest of the profit and profitability, but the environmental aspects as well. So this is what we try to teach them. This is what we try to get in their mind. And this is the first level, I think, the education. I mentioned education of the future leaders, but it's all the levels, the elementary school, the high schools, and so on and so on. It's very important. What is just as important as the latter issue is participation and engagement. We should, I think, define those phenomena. Participation, I mean, is you have the opportunity to get involved in issues. So if you can say your opinion, share your experiences, the know-how, the fears of yours, the hopes of yours, the preferences, if there are ways you can do it, the participation part is okay. Engagement is a little bit different because we mean under this phenomenon like people want to get involved in the issues. And we should we should make this issue as desirable for the people as we can, and this can be on frightening messages, and it can be on gaining panic, because if we say there's no hope, whatever we do, we will extinct, and so on, they will just ignore the issue. Why should I cope with this situation? It's no hope to cope with it. So we have to find the way that they can participate. We have to find the messages how they can engage themselves, and we have to find a way how they can act in their daily basis. So, for example, we all know that the waste generated in households are approximately 10% of the waste generated globally. But I personally think that collect the garbage selectively and put in selective cans is very important, because you can act in some ways to get involved and to be part of this solution. You can minimize your waste, for example. You can be part of the waste management procession. So I think education, participation and engagement, and the fourth level is work. So you can find the ways in your own profession how you can be part of the solution. Of course, you have a very easy challenge in this case, because you act directly in the climate field. But I personally believe that almost every profession can contribute to the climate efforts.
I have two surprise questions for you, as always. So let's imagine that we are in a survival game. You know, there are so many games like that. We need to survive, and now we need to survive climate change. There are three things that you can take with yourself for this long journey to tackle the adverse effects of climate change. So what are those three things that you would put into your backpack? Is it time? Do we need more time to solve this problem? Or is it technology, innovation? Or you just want to have some people coming with you, some partners in this fight? Because basically it's people changing the world, it's people changing cities, it's people coming up with new ideas. I just gave you some time to think about it, but you really need to list three things that you would bring with yourself for this journey.
Okay, first, it's a very good question, actually. Thank you. First, yes, time. Time is a very good choice, because more time we have to the transition, easier it gets. So yeah, time definitely is one of those what I wanted to or would like to put in my backpack. Second is innovation or creative mindset, because I think the resources of the material resources of the world are finite. That's without question. But the immaterial resources, like human mind, is endless. If you are creative enough, if you have a creative mindset, you can solve problems the same amount of resources. And we can see this, for example, in water management or in agriculture. So it's working. This would be the second one. And the third one, maybe negotiation skills, because you have to consider and reconcile so many different interests in this debate that you will need very good negotiation skills. And if we look at the COP26, 200 decision makers want to have an agreement on a paper, and it's very difficult. So maybe these three skills would I pack in my backpack.
Very good, thank you. And the last questions, we have 2 minutes left. So the last question is, basically at the end of the day, there are people sitting everywhere. There are people sitting behind governments, there are people sitting behind institutions, there are people sitting behind big companies, schools, there are people living in buildings. So these are people of today. So you need to ask one question, and you need to send a message to someone. The question you need to ask from is that generation from which we inherited this planet. So you need to ask a question. What question would you ask from our great-great-great-grandfathers? What they did for this present situation that we are in? And the second, what message would you send for those who are not sitting here to the future generations? What message would you send to the future? What questions would you ask from the past generations?
Okay, first the past generation. If I have the opportunity to ask something from the member of the past generation, I would ask him or her that how they get so much power to fight for the future, because in the past people had to cope so big difficulties, fight wars, fight for the land, but work every day very, very hard. How they get the power to do so? Because if we understand that, we can have the power of our own to cope with the difficulties of today. And the message for the future generations, I think, would be optimistic. Always be optimistic. Because if you look at the movies in the 60s, maybe, there were some very good future optimistic movies like Back to the Future or and so on, where flying cars and hovering boards was in the mind of the people who were thinking, what would be the future? What could be the future? And nowadays, we see the future very dark. It's understandable because we have difficulties, we have challenges ahead of us, but I think we should be much more optimistic because we have all the solutions right now. The technical, the technical solutions as well, but the real solutions are born here at the planet because we are the solutions as well. If one message can send to the future, it was this: be optimistic. Be optimistic in every time. Thank you.
And everybody matters. So, Máté, Litkei, the Director of Climate Policy Institute, thank you so much. It was a very interesting discussion. We were talking about the future ahead of us. And if somebody is going to ask you once how you had so much power to work on it, I think you work very hard on talking about climate change to people, and I wish you good health and a lot of power to do so in the future. Thank you. It was an honor talking to you today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for everybody listening to us.